Welcome back, everybody, to another reaction video, and today we're going to be looking at Potential History's Dan Sickles' Human Meme. I've been getting this one recommended to me for quite a while now. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited to dive into it. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you this really cool picture. It's not related too much to what we're talking about, but this is a picture from one of the reunions at the Gettysburg battlefield, which happened quite often amongst the men who fought there. But this particular picture is just really amazing because among other people who are in this photo, and I know there are other famous people besides these four, but from left to right, you have Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain right here. This is Dan Butterfield, Medal of Honor recipient. Both of these men, actually all three of these Union men in the front, were Medal of Honor recipients. Dan Butterfield also composed Taps. This is James Longstreet right here. And then this, the man with the one leg, is Dan Sickles, who is the subject of what we're going to talk about today. So just a couple of quick things before we get into what we're going to do today. Just please make sure you click on the link in the description and check out the original content creator. Give him a like, leave a comment, and watch that on the original site so we can support him for making this in the first place. The other thing is make sure that you hit like, subscribe, comment on this video, and I'll give you some call to action at the end on that. And just a heads up, though I try to be as family friendly as I possibly can with what I say, I can't always guarantee that through what I am reacting to. So no guarantees about that because I haven't seen this yet, so I don't know what it's all about. But let's go ahead and dive in.
This time I've got something I know you can do.
So we've got, right off the bat, we've got the face of George Gordon Meade, the commander of the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg, on SpongeBob's face. That's kind of interesting.
Deploy our troops.
Easy. Now you try. Lift your
Core.
Great. We're almost there. Now put it
In the line.
No, the
Line.
Peach Orchard,
Line.
Wheatfield,
Line.
Devil's Den. So, yeah, obviously, I'm sure he's going to talk about this more, but this is a reference to the fact that Dan Sickles commanded the 3rd Corps at Gettysburg. He was right over here on the bottom of the fishhook to the left of the 2nd Corps under Hancock that held the center of the line. And Sickles, because he had had a prior bad experience with the Confederates taking advantage of higher ground in front of him, I think it was at Hazel Grove at Chancellorsville, and they put artillery there and fired down on Sickles' men. Sickles seized the higher ground in front of his position on the south side of Cemetery Ridge, up around the Peach Orchard, and he decides he's going to move his entire corps forward against orders to do that. So I'm not surprised that this is where they're going with this.
Line.
Almost there. Now head for the
Line.
Cold. Warmer. 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 You're hot. You're on fire.
A direct cannonball hit severs his leg.
Hello all, and welcome to a new series titled Human Memes. Although I really hope I come up with a better title before this thing actually goes live, but right now that's all I got. This series will be exploring some very interesting historical figures. Not just people that are funny, although there will be those people. Also people who are interesting, have various quirks, are funny. And today, we're going to be talking about the life, actually not just the life, like a few events because there's so much shit, of a man who made himself famous during the American Civil War. You hear that noise? That's the sound of all the European viewers clicking off because they heard American Civil War.
So he made himself famous before the American Civil War, and I'm sure he's going to get into this, but Dan Sickles murdered Philip Barton Key, who was the son of Francis Scott Key, the guy that wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. And I'm sure he'll talk about this, but Key was having an affair with Sickles' wife. Never mind the fact that Sickles was having affairs as well. But Key made the mistake of coming right in front of their house and like signaling to her while Sickles was at home. So he grabs his gun and he goes out and he shoots Philip Barton Key down in broad daylight. And Philip Barton Key was actually also a government official. He was the Washington, D.C. district attorney. Sickles was a congressman at the time. He gets off on a plea of temporary insanity, the first time it had ever been successfully used in American history.
Don't care. And the person we'll be talking about today is Daniel Sickles, who is either the luckiest moron to ever exist or someone just playing 5D chess, just stuff that we can't even comprehend.
Very, very large brain.
Dan Sickles was born in 1819, although it's oftentimes said he was born in 1825. He was not born in 1825, although it's thought that he lied about his birthday quite often for reasons we'll get into in a second. He's a very well-connected person, learning the printer's trade and studying law at NYU. Admitted to the bar in 1846. But we're not here for the basic fact stuff. We're here for the weird stuff. And the weird stuff started very early in Dan Sickles' life. Dan Sickles was a very eccentric person.
Yep.
And throughout this story, when you're wondering if it gets weirder, it definitely does. And we're going to focus on two events, a murder and a Civil War battle. While studying law, he actually moved in with and got very close to one of his professors who had an infant daughter that Dan Sickles knew for her entire life. At 16 years old, when he was in his 30s, he married her.
Yep.
Which is probably why he lied about his age.
It's also probably why she started having affairs, because the guy was twice her age, and they probably did not have the deep in-love relationship that all hope for in marriages.
Other escapades in his young life include, while being married, striking up a relationship with a prostitute, and when on a trip to England on official business, almost introducing her to the Queen, which would have caused a huge scandal. He was apparently pulled away before being able to do so, but the woman did curtsy at the Queen. It was quite the affair. On the same trip, during a ball celebrating the 4th of July, Dan Sickles wasn't a huge fan of celebrating Independence Day with the British. So as the toast for the night was being made to the Queen, he decided to, instead of observe the toast, sit down in front of a small painting of George Washington and completely refuse to recognize the occasion.
I didn't know that, and that's actually kind of awesome that he did that. So I'll give Dan Sickles some points for that one.
Was promptly thrown out of England. Upon returning home, though, he was a national hero because people weren't big fans of the British still. He was elected to New York State Senate and then elected to the U.S. Congress, all while having multiple affairs and having a lot of it get into the newspapers.
Yeah, and he actually gets elected to Congress a couple of different times. He's elected to Congress years later, like in the 1880s or 1890s, he got elected to Congress again. He was the minister to Spain for Ulysses S. Grant after the Civil War. So Dan Sickles never really slowed down, even after losing his leg at Gettysburg, even after the court-martial, even after the murder of Philip Key, all that stuff.
Now, I'm just kind of rapid-firing these scenarios and these stories to you because I want you to get a general idea of who this guy is before we get into the real stories. And the first of the two I want to tell is about how he murdered somebody and got away with it. For all his womanizing and everything to do with that, historians do think that he really did love his wife. His underage wife, be it. He was very protective of her, and he really did care about her. However, being gone so often, his wife Teresa was pretty lonely at home, and she eventually ended up striking up a relationship with Philip Barton Key, the son of Francis Scott Key, the national hero. It's said that every day when Francis wanted to meet with Teresa, he would go outside of the Sickles residence and he would wave a handkerchief. And later on, the couple would meet in a park or somewhere else. That was the way that they it was the way that they communicated. And an anonymous friend of Dan Sickles, and one of the rare times that he was not abroad or out in Washington, sent him a letter informing him of the affair, telling him all the details and everything of all the handkerchief waving. And in one of the following days, what did he see outside his window? But Philip Barton, outside his house, waving a handkerchief. In a storm of rage, Dan Sickles burst out of his house, waving a gun, and began chasing Mr. Key down the street. And I think you know where this is going, but when he caught up to him, he shot him dead. He actually didn't shoot him dead. He eventually died of his wounds, but he first shot him in the chest, and then once he was down, he walked up to him and attempted to execute him, but the gun misfired. He couldn't. But it's 1859, so like, you get shot, you're gonna die, if the doctor doesn't kill you afterwards. However, this is not where the story gets interesting, because Sickles was obviously arrested, and he was going to be tried for his crimes, and knowing that this happened in broad daylight, people saw him, he was going to need a fairly creative defense to get out of it.
Unless you think, and maybe he'll talk, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, lest you think that this was some outlandish thing, Sickles, again, being well-connected, I think at one point he actually has the president, James Buchanan, show up at the trial to support him. Really fascinating stuff.
In a creative defense he found, with his dream team of lawyers, they decided to plead temporary insanity. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of a court case where somebody pleads temporary insanity or being temporarily just not themselves, but this is actually the first instance in recorded history where this was attempted. And because it hadn't been before, it was kind of up in the air if the jury was going to fall for this. However, Sickles kind of stacked the deck because he pulled in every political favor he possibly could, including having President Buchanan himself come into the courtroom and shake Dan Sickles' hand right in front of the jury. Basically,
think about the bad you-know-what move that is to have the president come in and put on that show in front of the jury. Today, they would never get away with that because that kind of thing wouldn't be allowed to happen. But that's the kind of guy that Dan Sickles was, that he lined this up and really did stack the deck in his favor.
Showing everyone that the president respects this man, likes this man, is friends with this man, and very much tainting the jury pool very quickly. And due to this combination of events, his temporary insanity plea did get him off the hook, being the first of probably not that many temporary insanity pleas. Now, this is all kind of a weird event and something you don't hear about every day, but really this is all that history would remember Dan Sickles for. And he probably would have been mostly forgotten to this day if it was not for a minor conflict that began in 1861. Upon the beginning of the American Civil War, states were required to raise troops for the defense of the Union and to tame the South. And oftentimes the way that this was done is a fairly influential person, such as maybe a previous congressman or state senator, would go around.
Dan Sickles' face sticks up from underneath. So yeah, I mean, this is a time in history when it wasn't like it is today. It wasn't a purely professional army where you have West Pointers in charge and things like that. If you raised a regiment of soldiers, you very often got to be in command of that regiment of soldiers. If you were a popular and influential person who enlisted as a private, you might get elected to be the captain of your company. And a lot of people rose to high command without any prior military experience whatsoever.
Around, and he would recruit troops under his banner, and then he would get an automatic military commendation. In doing this, Dan Sickles became a corps commander in the Army of the Potomac. No, he had not done anything in the military previously.
So he didn't become a corps commander because of this. He became a brigadier general in command of what was called the Excelsior Brigade. But it was through his merit as a brigade commander and a division commander that he got up to corps command. It wasn't because he was completely incompetent. He definitely had some skill and some ability in the field, because there were plenty of other men who were professional soldiers who never rose that high. So you can't completely discount that Sickles at least knew what he was doing as a commander.
Yes, this is how they used to work. And as you would expect, there are quite a few interesting stories from him throughout the American Civil War, being such a unique person as he was. But the biggest one, and the one he is most remembered for, happens at the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, one thing that's often not remembered about the Union Army during the war, or has kind of been forgotten as time has passed, is the great amount of politics involved in the command of the Army of the Potomac. Everyone in the Union Army knew each other, all the high-ranking officers, whether they had previously been in the military and served before and knew each other from that, or if they were in Sickles' position, had previously been politicians.
And particularly people who had previously been Democrat politicians, because Lincoln was very mindful of the need for as much unity in the North as possible. And so very often he would almost go out of his way to make sure that prominent Democrats were in positions of influence in the Army. And of course, Edwin Stanton, his Secretary of War, was a Democrat. But people like John McClernand, who was an absolute train wreck of a corps commander under Grant and constantly tried to undermine him, was nevertheless permitted to stay in influential position until Grant finally had a legitimate excuse during the Vicksburg campaign to throw him out. But it was because he was a war Democrat, and they needed those people in positions of power and influence.
Or other men of influence knew each other from before the war that way. And Sickles, along with many other Union commanders and kind of a clique, was very good friends with a certain General Hooker. Hooker was the general of the Army of the Potomac before George Gordon Meade took over, literally right before the Battle of Gettysburg, and they were very close. So when Hooker was forced out, he did not take to Meade too kindly. In fact, you could pretty much say he was trying to undermine him from day one. And one of the ways he tried to do this in the most dramatic fashion was with his actions on July 2nd.
I would not argue, though, that Sickles did this specifically to undermine Meade. That may have made him think it was okay to do it, but he did it because he thought that it gave him an advantageous position, and it was based on, as I mentioned earlier, his prior experience at the Battle of Chancellorsville with giving up high ground in front of him to the Confederates.
Sickles' Corps was positioned on the southern end of the Union line, roughly here on the map. And he was told by George Meade to straddle these hills and take up this position, and he was told to be here. And for lots of reasons that historians still debate about to this day, Sickles decided to move his troops up to here. Now, it's really unclear whether he misunderstood Meade's orders, was trying to do this just to be a dick, or if he thought that the position that he was at was not really that suitable and thought he would move forward to better align himself because Meade wasn't there and wasn't seeing the terrain.
You don't get to Corps Command by making decisions just because you want to be a jerk or because you don't like the guy above you. I just don't buy that at all about Sickles. He did it because he thought it was an advantageous position. He thought he was doing what he thought was the right thing to do. It doesn't change the fact that he had a direct order not to do it.
Way, he essentially created a gigantic hole in the Union line that when Meade was informed about this, immediately sent multiple runners to tell him to move back up the hill and take the position he told him to. When he did, Sickles basically sent back a bunch of nonsense replies, kind of dancing around the issue in hilarious fashion. Meade eventually got so fed up with the song and dance that he himself went to Sickles and told him, "No, your men are supposed to be there."
Too late.
Really pointing out on the field where his men were supposed to be and asking him, very annoyed, why he had moved his men forward. And in a situation that you just can't make up, apparently right as Meade was pointing to the position that Sickles was supposed to be in, the first Confederate cannon blast of Longstreet's attack rang out over the hills. Meade quickly jumped on his horse, and I assume said something like, "You better not fuck this up," and rode off to go plug the hole in the Union line. Although it would be great to say Sickles saw something on the field that Meade didn't, and his move turned out to be a stroke of genius, it was not. His corps was completely chewed up.
Large brain.
Sickles himself lost a leg when it was crushed by a cannonball while he was riding his horse.
So he's right over by the Trossel barn when a cannonball, smashes right into his leg. And in fact, you can see, because I'm sure he'll talk about when you see pictures of the leg, you can see exactly how the one leg, or the one bone, I think it's the fibula, was just shattered.
The entire command suffered heavy casualties. In fact, reserves were only just able to be brought up behind his shattered corps before they retreated to make sure that the Confederates didn't just overrun the Union line. Dan Sickles did survive the war, though. In fact, his leg is currently in the Smithsonian Museum, and it was.
It's not in the Smithsonian. It's, I think, at the Army War College or the Army Medical College, something like that. It's not the Smithsonian. It's some other place. And Sickles would visit it. And if you go to the movie Lincoln, there's a scene. I don't remember where it is in the movie, but there's a scene, and the scene opens up with Dan Sickles' amputated hairy leg in the case. It hadn't decayed at that point. And you can kind of see the little thing with it that talks about it being Dan Sickles' leg. And he would go there on the anniversary of the amputation and visit his leg.
Actually put there while he was still alive. Apparently when the exhibit opened, he was being taken around, and the entire time he wouldn't shut up about he wanted the tour group to go see his leg. Upon seeing his leg, he was very upset that his foot was not part of the femur bone that was in the exhibit, because of course he was. Now this is a very brief overview of all things to do with Dan Sickles, and I only really went into 2 stories. And you can go into them deeper. Civil War historians have actually really debated Sickles' motivations.
Okay, so that cut off right in the middle, so I didn't know it was ending that quick. But so let's talk a little bit more about Sickles. He was aggressive in his criticism of Meade after the Battle of Gettysburg. He insisted that his actions had actually saved the Union Army and won the battle. He eventually, years later, like 30-some years later, was given the Medal of Honor, mostly for his behavior after he was wounded and inspiring his men. He's laying on this stretcher as they're hauling him off to go amputate his leg, and he sits up and kind of smokes a cigar and shows the men how tough he was and tried to inspire them. And he was given the Medal of Honor for that, but he was also court-martialed for disobeying a direct order that day, and he never served in combat command again after that. But like I said, he becomes minister to Spain under Grant. He once again gets elected to Congress years later, was very active in the preservation of the Gettysburg battlefield, visited often, went to the reunions. In fact, you can see early film of him sitting in his wheelchair, gray hair, still got that mustache, still smoking cigars, much more heavy at that point. In 1913, at the 50th anniversary, I think it was the 50th anniversary, visiting the Gettysburg battlefield not long before he died. Just a fascinating story. There's much more to it than that. But let me know your thoughts about Dan Sickles, your opinion about the things that we've talked about here. Use that comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and definitely check out the original content creator as well. Thanks for watching.